Which brings us to sanctuary renewal. And incidentally, these have been in alphabetical order, the categories. Since worship is the heartbeat of our life together, we desire that our center for worship be renewed to be even more vibrant, beautiful, and accessible. So possible projects include, and I'll show some pictures of this in a moment, to redesign and reconfigure the liturgical and musical areas, the front, so that it's accessible for all, which is such an important point here. Pastor Caitlin has named many times that if she were to have a colleague that used a wheelchair or couldn't do stairs, that there's no way for that person to get to our space at the choir level, not to mention the final 3 steps up to the high altar.
And can I
Yes.
just share one thing? Recently, even within the last few months, we have a new member who wants to be a reader but can't get up those stairs to the lectern. And so we had to put a microphone on the floor in front of the lectern so that she could then be a reader and worship. So there's lots of different kinds of examples of how accessibility affects our space. And when people are in our space, particularly people who with different levels of capacity to get upstairs, that actually says something to them. It says something to them about how we welcome people of a variety of different capabilities.
Indeed, thank you.
Yeah.
There are also ways in which the building could be used much more for musical groups if the front of the space had movable furniture. And for example, now Stratus Chamber Orchestra plays in the area where the bell choir and the piano is on the ground level. You can't see them. They don't enjoy being there. It's not good lighting. Augustana Arts had a harpsichord concert I was at several months ago, and there were 4 beautiful harpsichords on the ground level. And again, you weren't able to see them. So we have many places in Denver that host community concerts, and there's a real desire to be at a place like Augustana with really wonderful acoustics, but our space doesn't make people really want to be there. New flooring, improve the audio system, AV systems, new seating cushion, some question about replacing the windows, those stained glass windows in the north aisle, perhaps with clear glass, to allow more light, and you can kind of see in and out better there. That may or may not be something we would do. Expand AC in the choir room and east restrooms, and of course some asbestos. So a couple days ago, I was rooting around again in the archive room we have at Augustana, and I was very, very intrigued to find this photo, because a couple weeks ago, I said, I wonder if when the building was originally built, if the pastor stood at the altar table and faced the wall and the cross rather than on the other side that we do and face the people. And lo and behold, this photo appeared answering my question. So yes, indeed, this was the typical style in the 50s, 60s, in which the clergy faced the back wall. And just for a moment, notice the separateness between the pastor up 9 steps facing the back wall as though somehow God lives in the cross. What's interesting, in our architect, Edward Sovic, in his book, he talks about kind of a shift in thinking that really God is present in the assembly, and it's the people gathered where God is present, not in the furniture, not in the cross, and that really this style of an altar in a high place really emphasizes the idea that this is like a sacrifice happening way up in a high place, separate from the people. In the Roman Catholic Church in 1964, I believe it was, they had this Vatican Council, and this used to be how the Roman Catholic priests all did their worship service. And on one day in November of 1964, a decree was made that all churches should have a freestanding altar, now called a table, and brought down to where the people are, and that the people can gather around it. Well, this is what our space is now. But this is Welshire Presbyterian Church. They have lots of concerts there, by the way. And when I was last there, I looked at this space and I said, oh my goodness, it really depicts what is in a lot of the imagination of what we're talking about. This lower level with the lectern and table and font, we could build a platform such as this in the area where the bell choir table and piano and kind of font is. We already have that space set aside, but we don't really use it very often and use it well. That would be perhaps 3 steps up. And then you see here in their space, they have 3 more steps up to their higher level. In our case, that higher level would remain where the organ and the piano and the choir would be, and we would have the choir rather be on 2 sides, which is very difficult for our singing in the choir. The choir would be, and I have a photo of this in a moment, would be behind the altar on that upper level. There would be room for brass or other musicians. We have, some of you don't know what we go through in order to try to make everything fit on that space. But this is just one imagination of what our space could be something like. This is Gloria Dei Lutheran Church in St. Paul, and very similar. Notice they have a ramp up to their liturgical level. They don't go up 3 more spaces to their choir level. We also are trying to figure out how we would also have a ramp that would get people to that level as well, so that anybody would be able to get up to any level. Now, this is that same church before their renewal. Notice big, tall altar against the wall. They actually put a little free altar table behind the bride and groom there. I could only find a wedding photo online. And their choir was on each side in those choir stalls. And they also had kind of white Jesus and white cherub angels kind of on the back wall. And this next photo shows what they did to the space. We don't have to do this much because we already have a really marvelous space in many ways. But this is what they transformed their space to, again, to bring the liturgical furniture and liturgical action close to the people. And then the music area in that area behind, again, our music area would be up 3 more steps. But this is really exactly the feeling of what is being imagined. Here's just another photo of that same space. They actually also removed all of their pews and they chose to put in chairs instead, which allows for some different kind of flexibility. A space can be used in different ways when there's chairs in place.
Ken, if I could
Yes.
make my comment about the choir,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Music at Augustana is such an interesting part of who we are. And the music, the way the choir functions, it really is evangelical for us. Music in its way at Augustana is fairly evangelical in terms of people come to listen to the music, and people often stay at the congregation because of the music. They stay for lots of reasons. They stay for can ministry. They stay for the preaching, we could argue. They stay for a lot of reasons, but unifying the choir and creating a space where music actually can function in its place and the worship leadership can function, meaning the pastors and communion and the font can function in also a central, more closer to the people place. It's not just about making Andy more comfortable at the organ or giving the choir comfier seats to sit in. It is actually about integrating all of who we are and what we do in a way that makes sense for the way we do it, but also for the way it becomes a way we share good news, I guess is what I would say. So anyway, Ken, anything to add on
Well, yeah,
that?
and if you would also just share what baptisms are like at Augustana.
Oh, you may not realize this, but baptisms are actually quite perilous at Augustana. I'm often kind of shepherding our young families up there at the font to make sure they're not backing up and backing toward those steps. So, I mean, it's just one example of how, and I think that raised font area is a late addition. Is that right,
Yes,
Ken?
that is
And
correct.
so, however that got strategized, it's pretty darn tricky up there. So, is that what you mean?
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
kept backing up to find this photo again to show, and our space actually, I think our space is even wider than this. For us to have space for our people, even a large baptismal party to gather around the font area also would enhance our worships. And some congregations invite children to come forward for the baptism. Maybe rather, instead of a children's sermon that day, they invite the children forward to gather around. The way ours is now, we couldn't even, the children would be behind the piano if we were to do something like that. So lots of exciting possibilities. Let me move forward here again. And this is just a photo of again, one of those kind of floor transformations as well.